So I had a near-death experience 11 years ago, and the reason why I had the near-death experience was I was taking a class 4 narcotic diet pill at the time that was designed to be taken only for 3 months, and I took it for 9 years. And what happened was it did a lot of damage to my heart and my lungs, and I got to the point where I was losing my breath constantly. I wasn't able to breathe. I wasn't able to get air into my lungs anymore. They weren't opening. And all of my organs started shutting down one by one, and my heart. I could feel it beating slower and slower, and I would do things like jump up and down, and I couldn't get any air into my lungs, and my heart just wasn't cooperating. And I lost consciousness as a result, and took my last breath. And as I took my last breath, that's when I left my body. And I remember as I'm leaving my physical body, floating up to the ceiling and glancing down one more time at the paramedics that were coming to help me, and knowing that that was me, and yet I was up above at the same time with the real me, the spiritual soul, watching all of these events unfold. And I let go. And as soon as I chose to let go, that's when I was embraced by this incredible light in this tunnel that propelled me at an incredible force. It was so powerful and so magnificent, so loving. I've never ever felt this kind of love before, and it's really a challenge to put in words to describe the magnitude of the love and the embrace that I felt in this tunnel. And I effortlessly was propelled with force and got to the very top of the end of the tunnel where the light was. And in that very moment, I was delivered into the hands of God. And God and I stood together, and God was on my right, and heaven was behind us. And I was very aware that heaven was a planet. And God and I stood together. And as we're looking out in front of us at the galaxy and all of the stars in front of us, I hear in my left ear, it was a vintage sounding projector, and it sounded like a movie was starting. And as soon as I heard the projector going in my left ear, I could see the stars that were just stars at one time all of a sudden lined up like a curtain, and the curtain opened slowly to the right, and I heard 3, 2, 1, and it was a life review of Érica MakKένzī on the projector screen. So it was God and I in a big movie theater in the galaxy. And that's when my life review began. And literally for me, the life review was everything from that day that I was born up until that day that I had taken my last breath and I died. And in this life review, I was shown everything from things like losing a tooth, losing my first tooth, graduating from high school, any kind of awards that I had won in athletics or cheerleading, all of these things that were great accomplishments, and they were really happy times, but they were significant things that man deems as significant, if you will, accomplishments. And as I'm watching all of these events unfold in chronological order, I'm actually reliving the event in that very moment as if it had just happened the first time. As we're observing it, I'm living it. And we finally get to the end on the day that I died. And the movie screen turned off. And then all of a sudden, in front of me, I knew to look down, and it was this telepathic communication. And as I had the knowing I needed to look down, appear in front of me a pair of eyeglasses. And I've never worn glasses before, and God said to put them on, and I didn't know how I was going to put these glasses on, because you have to understand these glasses weren't normal pair of glasses that you would find here on Earth. These were the size of a vehicle, and I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to put these glasses on? I just don't even know. And I remember as soon as I had the thought of how am I going to do this, it didn't even matter. My hands were already drawing the glasses near to put them on my face, and by the time that I got them to my face, it wasn't even a problem. They fit perfectly, and I could see. I could really see. And then God said, now look. And as soon as he said, now look, again, I heard that vintage movie projector in my left ear. 3, 2, 1, the curtain opened again, life review of Érica MakKένzì. So this was my second life review. And this time, I didn't see at all what I had seen the first time in the life review. This time I could see. And everything that I saw in this life review, starting with the day that I was born until that day that I had died, was not at all what I had seen before. This time these were things that were important to God, not important to man. And they were not at all those accomplishments that I talked about before. These were things like love and acts of kindness, things I couldn't even remember that I had done. Befriending someone that everybody was mean to, or a neglected an animal, and I helped an animal, or giving money to a homeless person when I didn't really have money to give. Helping someone across the street, an elderly person. Every single action, word, thought, feeling was all about love. And we lived all of those series of events just like the first time, like it was happening for that very first time. I lived it again, and I felt so much unconditional love from God as we're reliving this series of events together. And we got to the day again that I died, and the life review was over. And as soon as the life review was over, I remember knowing to look up. And so I looked up, and this was the only time that I was able to see God in a physical form at all. And what it was from his shoulder down to his fingertips. And his arm was bigger than a semi-truck. And I remember him making the motion to look up like this, and that's what he did with his arm. And I looked as high as the highest stars, and I could barely see anymore. It was so high up in the air. And I watched, and I looked in the palm of his hand, and in the palm of his hand appeared a rock, a single, large, huge boulder, if you will, rock. And God and I watched together, and I watched him let loose the rock. And the rock was falling, and it was falling for such a long time. It seemed like just forever. And we're watching this rock fall together, and I hear him say, "I am the rock. I am the light." And when he said, "I am the light," the rock was glowing. It was the most incredible, powerful light. It was so brilliant, in fact, almost blinding, but yet I was able to keep watching it. And as the rock came right in front of us, and it's still falling, in front of me appeared the largest body of water, larger than the largest ocean, if you can imagine. I couldn't even see the borders outstretched all around me. And we watched this rock fall, and it fell into the ocean, and it made one single ripple, just one. And we watched that single ripple grow together, and that single ripple, it grew and it grew and it grew until you couldn't even see the borders of that ripple anymore. And God said to me, "You are the rock. You are the light. You are the ripple that affects mankind." And I knew in that very moment, with the 2 life reviews, what that meant. And it wasn't about just me, Érica. It was about each and every one of us being that very rock when we're here on this journey, this earthly journey as humans, that we affect each and every person, even if we never meet them, just like that rock did in that water and the rippling effect. And I understood what that meant. And then as soon as we were done with the rippling effect, God told me to look again. And I remember looking to my right this time. And all of a sudden in front of me, to my right, I look out and I'm like, those are shelves. And on these shelves, all of a sudden, they're brilliant white. And I mean, the colors, I can't even begin to describe in human words the magnitude of the colors. But what I can tell you is the colors were so magnificent that they took on a life, to be alive. If shelves, if you can imagine having a life, but they were alive. They were so full of life. And these shelves, on all these shelves, they went as high as the highest stars. And there was presents, gifts, if you will, like at Christmas, and not one gift was the same, not one. And I remember knowing to look out to the galaxy to my left, looking as far as I could past all the stars and planets, as far as it could go, and the shelves kept on going with gifts on them. And then I remember knowing to look to my right, and I looked behind me to my right, and I kept on looking as far as I could, and the shelves kept on going with gifts. Not one gift was the same, and there were so many. And God said to me, Erica, in life, I give each and every one of you gifts, and they're all different, because that is part of my plan. And he said, when you were born, I gave you the gift. I gave you the gift of patience, and I gave you the gift of beauty. And I'm such a rule follower, I can't believe I argued with God. I didn't argue in a mean way, but when he said that, I found myself communicating and thinking the thought, oh no, God, that can't be right. You didn't give me the gift of beauty because, you see, I had made some very bad choices in my life. And that's what resulted in me taking that pill, a diet pill. And I never thought I was good enough. I was always trying to be everything that man thought was good enough. And instead, what happened is I stifled who God really made me to be. And he stopped me and he said, Erica, again, I gave you the gift of patience. And I gave you the gift of beauty. And in that very moment, I knew what that meant. That beauty came from within my heart. And it's an extension of all of us, the love that we carry in our hearts. And I looked at all of the gifts on the shelves, and I knew how significant and beautiful and wonderful each and every one of these gifts that he gives all of us are. And in life, he said, he has more gifts for each and every one of us. Each and every one of us. And all we have to do to get those gifts is ask. But then we have to be able to be quiet and listen to receive them. And that was something that I was told quite a few times in heaven. My experience in heaven, I feel like I was there for a lifetime, and I learned so many lessons. God and I, we shared so many. But I want to share with you one of the lessons that I call the last lesson. And it was, in fact, the last lesson that God and I shared before I returned to earth. And this time, God had told me to look to my left. And I looked down to my left, and all of a sudden appeared in front of me earth. And I'm watching and I'm looking at earth, and all of a sudden I'm noticing something strange about it. And I pay attention, I look a little bit closer, and I see that the earth was engulfed in flames everywhere, all over the planet, flames. And I began to panic because it was the first moment that I thought about my family. And I looked down and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my kids are down there, you know, my family, my husband, my parents, my sister. And I was panicking because there's these flames. And I looked at God and he was on my right. And all of a sudden I knew to look down in front of me again, and again appeared those glasses. Now the first time I had put the glasses on, I could see what I didn't see before. And already knowing that I'm seeing flames without glasses, I didn't want to put them on. I didn't want to see what I hadn't seen. I was afraid. But it didn't matter. As soon as I saw the glasses again, they were coming on me, and I felt my hands drawing them to my face, and I put them on, and as soon as they were on my face, I found myself looking. And God and I together looked again this time. And this time, I looked, and all between each and every one of the flames all over the planet were these silvery white things lifting off. And I'm looking and I'm focusing, and I noticed, oh my gosh, those are souls. Those are people. And they're fine. They're unscathed. They're lifting off in between the flames unscathed. And they were coming up behind us and going into the planet, which was heaven. And I was so excited. I was so relieved. And I said, oh my gosh, God, look. They're fine, they're okay. And all of a sudden, I was so happy, I was so joyful, but at the same time, this was the very first time in my whole experience with God that I felt this incredible magnitude of sadness from God. And I said, no, look, God, it's okay. They're not hurt. And he looked at me and he said, Erica, it's free will. And I didn't understand what that meant at first, because to me, everybody was fine. But he was crying for the ones that chose the separation from him. And I understood in that very moment how much God loves each and every one of us and wants that connection with each and every one of us. But he loves us so much that he lets us have that choice to have that connection. And then it was time for me to go. And I told God I didn't want to go. I couldn't imagine. I knew that I was home. And I had no desire to go back. Even though my family was there, I knew at the same time they would be fine. Everything would be okay. And God said, "Child, you're not staying. You work for me now, remember?" And he said, "Before you go, I want to give you 2 more gifts." He said, "I want you to take the gift of patience and beauty, and now I'm going to give you knowledge and wisdom. And I want you to be quiet and listen to the people that I put into your life. And then when you speak, you will change millions of people's lives." It's so great to see each and every one of you, Facebook friends and YouTube friends, friends from all over the world. I can't tell you how blessed I am to be able to stand here and finally say, I'm ready. My book is coming out, Dying to Fit In. For those of you that don't know, I have been working on this book for 13 years. October 2002, I had a near-death experience. Following my near-death experience, I've learned so many lessons. I hope to share my experience and lessons with you, the good, bad, and the ugly. Come along for the ride, you guys. Hopefully, if anything, you'll learn a little, laugh a lot, and it'll give you something to think about, because we each have a story. Each and every one of us, we each have a journey. We each have things that we go through. And you know what? That's the best thing about life. Life is an incredible opportunity for learning. This is Earth School. We're here to learn. No one's perfect. We're here to enjoy this journey together and work together and advance as a planet. I hope that you will find some light and love and knowledge to know and feel that you are loved unconditionally, the way you're meant to be, your unique self. It took me dying to realize that your uniqueness is actually your value. All of those years, I had been suppressing my unique self because I was so desperate. I was dying to fit in. I did everything you can imagine, making bad choices, listening to everyone tell me what was right for me, what it took to fit in, what it took to belong. I looked to everything except for myself. I stifled myself along the way. I learned what it means to be quiet and listen, not to others, but to ourselves, that inner knowing, and God, our Creator. I learned how to grow this connection between our Creator. The bridge, it does exist. The bridge on the other side, it exists. And it is the most incredibly beautiful thing you will ever know. Each and every one of us. So come on, let's get started.
NDEers, the near-death experiencers, that they come back changed. There's a wonderful woman I met through my website, and her name is Érica MakKennedy. And gosh, we spent 3 hours on the phone, our first phone call, and she told me about her near-death experience with God. It was the most incredible thing I have ever heard. She is truly a remarkable human being. I feel so blessed to know her, and I can't wait for you to meet her. I've invited her here. I'm very excited to introduce you and to allow you to experience the magic that happens when she's nearby. I know you've had an amazing experience, a near-death experience with God. And as you know, I've lost my son. And I would like to ask you on my behalf and on the behalf of other grieving parents out there, what can you tell us about your journey over there that might help comfort us and let us know that there truly is something more, that our children are safe and loved and with God in heaven?
Is my hope that through my story, my dying and coming back, that when I speak, I will help to bring some light and love and knowledge to feel and know that you are loved unconditionally, the way you are meant to be, your unique self. I went through my life as a young child loving everyone and feeling the love from God unconditionally that He had for me. And then there was a period of my life when I got to be a teenager and I started stifling God's voice, because what was happening is I really wanted to be liked, to be loved, to be accepted by everyone, by man. And that led me down a path, a very dangerous path of making a lot of choices that were not only unhealthy, but they ultimately led to my death. This is what happened. I took my last breath, and the most remarkable thing ended up happening. It took me dying to realize that my uniqueness was actually my value. And my value is my contribution here on this earthly journey. And that's God's plan, because that is how we are able to go on and do great things together. God and I shared so many lessons. I was literally there for what felt like a lifetime. I truly felt I was staying in heaven. I never wanted to be parted from God. When you take a story, an experience someone's had, and embrace it, using it as a learning opportunity, it has the potential to enlighten others and become a powerful tool of healing and awakening. I'm Érica Makc Kένzι. 14 years ago, I had a near-death experience that profoundly transformed how I view life and death and how I now live my life. My experience was so important to me that I wrote a book about it. And I'm committed to encouraging people who have had a near-death or some other non-ordinary experience to talk about it. By sharing my story, people have contacted me from all over the world with questions. Many have graciously opened their hearts, sharing their personal experience and how it's changed their lives. Your stories have inspired me to work as a team with other experts who see the value in learning from these experiences. Your stories and questions are important, so I'm listening. And the States of Consciousness research team at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine is listening too. Through their new anonymous web-based survey study, this dedicated team of researchers is offering an incredible opportunity for you to share your near-death or some other non-ordinary experience that fundamentally altered your beliefs or understanding about death and dying. Your personal contribution is uniquely valuable. We're here and we're ready to listen. So come on, join our team and let's get started by answering some of the questions that you may have about the survey.
Well, we're back with my next guest who spent years worrying how her poor habits and decisions on earth were putting her on a fast track to hell. But what she found out when she died was actually the complete opposite. Meet Érica.
I had struggled with body issues my whole life. When I first started taking diet pills in 1993, I rationalized it that it couldn't be that bad, even though I'm a nurse, and I should have known better than to take a class 4 narcotic. Soon the pills took my life over. It became my life for the next 9 years. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating. I was physically exhausted. I was destroying my body, but I was hiding it from everyone, even my husband. I could feel my body shutting down. My lungs were collapsing. My heart was beating more erratic. Finally, my husband, out of desperation, suggested I go to a local hotel and sleep. That if I was away from the house and the kids, that I would be able to get rest. By the time I got from my car to the lobby to check into the hotel, the symptoms were so much worse, and I felt like I was going to pass out. I finally got to my hotel room, and I knew this was it. I was seized with panic, that I was dying. All I could think was, I've got to get out of here, I've got to get help. I just remember with all of my might, opening the door, running out of the hotel. A stranger should have hit me with his car, but he stops right in front of me and he says, "Hey lady, you need help?" I got into the car and he took me to his church. It was right up the hill. The pastor met us outside. They carried me into the church. I couldn't even remember who I was. There was no coming back. This was it. I was gonna die. As I slipped away from my body, I remember looking down from the ceiling, seeing the paramedics coming in to attend to my body. I remember feeling like it's too late for me. I wasn't coming back. I was already dead.
Érica joins us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So describe the feeling of having your body leave the earth behind.
I remember, looking down at this lifeless body and knowing, well, that's me, but then having the realization that this was really me.
Today in our Oz Talk, the science of near death. Dr. Sam Parnia, author of Erasing Death, is here. He's leading the largest ever medical study into the topic of death. And what he teaches us, the stories of people that have come back from the death, can help us avoid any regrets when that moment comes, because eventually it will. And if you're afraid of the pain and fear of death, then pay attention to this Oz Talk. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Everyone has a perception about death. And it's really something that's framed based upon our history, our culture. But it's important to understand, I'm an intensive care doctor. My job is to save people's lives when they become very sick, and to try to ensure that they don't cross beyond the threshold of death. But unfortunately, people do sometimes. And so what we now know is that there is a science by which we can save people's lives and ensure they don't come back without brain damage. But also what that science is telling us is about what happens when we die. What is the human experience of death? What happens to consciousness? What happens to our mind? Do we become annihilated? Now, traditionally, these are thought to be philosophical or religious questions, but today they're really in the forefront of science. So what does happen when we die? Essentially, death is a process. It's not a black and white moment. What happens is, no matter why we become sick, whether it's a heart attack, it's a stroke, whether we have a car accident, it doesn't matter why, but the final result is that we have a reduction in the oxygen that gets inside the brain when we're about to die. And that causes our brain circuits to shut down, and we become unconscious to the outside world. When the heart stops, all life processes go out because there's no more blood getting into the brain, into your kidneys, into your livers, and we become lifeless, motionless. And that's the time that doctors use to give us a time of death. But what's really remarkable, and that has been discovered in the last 10 or 20 years, is that actually it's only after we die, after we go beyond the threshold of death, that the cells inside the body start to decompose. And they don't decompose even in the brain in just a few minutes. It can take many hours of time. So what that means is we are dead when we die. It's not that we weren't dead. We are dead. But the cells are starting to go through their own process of death. Our brain doesn't work, but we're gradually decomposing. From my perspective, that means that we have a lot of time to bring people back if we know what to do. So what are the things we can do? We can cool the brain down because we know that it's a chemical process and we can slow down the rate by which cells die, restart the heart again and reverse the process that caused them to die if there is a science available to do that at this time. Now, a lot of people are afraid of death because it's the unknown. But what we actually know is that when we die, if we sort of jump into the person's body at that time, that experience is not unpleasant for the vast majority of people. Put aside those who've tried to commit suicide or done something like that to themselves. For those of us who die naturally, what happens is even if we were in pain before we died, the process of death becomes very comfortable, it's very blissful, it's peaceful. And what people then describe to us is incredible. They describe a sensation of experiencing a bright, warm, welcoming light that draws the person towards it. They describe a sensation sometimes of experiencing their deceased relatives, almost as if they've come to welcome them. They describe that they actually didn't want to come back anymore in many cases. It's so comfortable and it's like a magnet that draws them that they don't want to come back. A lot of them, and what is fascinating from my perspective, is they actually describe a sensation of separating from themselves and watching doctors and nurses working on them. They can hear things. They can recall all conversations. They can see everything. And they describe in clear detail what had happened, which means it can't be a hallucination because they come back and tell us everything that we were doing. They're describing real events, not imaginary events. Doctors and nurses are like, I don't know how he told me this because he was dead. And some of them describe a sensation where they actually review everything that they have done. So if I hurt somebody, whether on purpose or unintentionally, if I said something that was spiteful, then I experience that exact pain that I may have caused you or somebody else. And so I judge myself. Somebody else doesn't judge me. I realize what I should have done. Obviously, for most people, they're not going to come back to tell us. But because of our science, we can now bring people back, and those who come back tell us exactly what the experience of death was like for them. And what's really profound is that they become transformed in a very positive way. They see life very differently. Now they realize that life had more meaning. They've been given a second chance, and they can do things differently. And by and large, what they say is that we realize we should have tried to be of more service to others, try to spend more time with our families, try to help others much more, essentially be less self-centered and more altruistic. Now, somebody might say, well, how do we know this is true? I think it's important to explain two things. One is that until very recently, we couldn't bring people back after they had died. Okay? And so basically, it was thought to be purely philosophical or religious. But today, there is a science by which we can bring them back. And it's like the old days, you know, when people set out from Europe to go to find the Americas, and they found all these amazing creatures and these amazing experiences nobody had seen before. When they came back and told people, a lot of people never believed them. They thought they were drunk, they thought they were imagining it. It's important to understand, though, that this is an experience that has been described from all over the world, sometimes from children less than 3 years old, who have no idea about life, death, the afterlife, religious questions, and they all describe the same thing. I had a small child who told me that when I died, I experienced a bright lamp. So they used children's terminology, and he drew a picture of it with a lamp, and he said, when you die, you're connected by a cord to the lamp, and it's the cord that gets cut when you go. Of course, he didn't say it like that, but he said it during the course of play. Gradually, it built up. And adults have said the same thing to us as well. These experiences have been described from all over the world, from Southeast Asia, from the Middle East, from Africa, from the United States. And what we see is that the experience is very much the same, but the interpretation, frankly, like any experience, depends on the person's background. So, for instance, if a Christian person has this experience and they see a being full of love and compassion, they say that I saw Christ. But if you actually really push them, they say, well, I don't know if it was Christ. I expected it to be Christ because I believe that. And if you talk to a Hindu, they may say that I saw one of the Hindu gods. And if you talk to an atheist, they'll say, well, I don't know why I had this experience because I don't believe in anything anyway, but, well, I did see this being of light and it was really full of love and compassion and I don't know how to account for it, but I think it's going to change the way I'm going to live my life. So I think what I'd like to simply end with is to say that while we are afraid of death, because it is the unknown, and unfortunately it's an inevitable consequence from all of us, despite all the medical care that we try to provide, that there is now a science and that death does not have to be limited to philosophy or religion, but it can be explored through these means. And it helps us to understand how we should obviously provide medical care, from my perspective, but also how we should live our lives today to give ourselves more meaning and to make sure that when we do reach that end, as somebody once said to me, I don't want to fail. I feel like I lived my life with a D. I was given a second chance. I hope that when I go back the second time, I'll be given a C at the very least when I go back. I hope this was useful to you.